Hello guys, welcome back to this channel. Today we're doing the very first tier list. I was about to say another tier list, but I haven't done one yet. So, not much to say really, but I guess we can get right into it. The way this is going to work, I'm going to put out each movie. I'm going to change some of these tiers up, and we can just get right into it. So, they're all in order of release date, not chronological order, because this is just a little easier and better. So, yeah, let me just fix up the tiers and we can get right into it. Okay, starting off with the original Iron Man, this is going in the amazing tier. This, as the very first MCU movie, it is absolutely fantastic. Still one of my favorites to date. And as a whole, it just holds up nicely. And it just works. So, I would say, yeah, it's quite good. Some great character arcs with Tony Stark. Owen Stane's a great villain. Pepper Potts, Happy, and some of the other characters are great. In ways, I actually would say I prefer Terrence Howard's Rhodey to Don Cheadle's, because and you never get the next time thing, or whatever you want to say. Some of the action's not as good and as spectacle as it becomes in the MCU. Like, the final battle is just okay, but the cave action sequence is one of the best sequences in the entire MCU. And there's just so many great things in this movie. I don't know why people don't like it as much as some other ones. It's just fantastic. I don't know another way to put it. Incredible Hulk, it's okay, I guess. I'll put it in enjoyable enough. I'm gonna put it in enjoyable enough. And these are kind of two. Debate me these two. I'll just, I don't know. This is tricky. Enjoyable enough and okay are some close. You know, I'm just gonna put it in okay and just make this good, because it'll make things a little easier. So it's just it's okay. Like, there's nothing. It's not a bad movie by chance, but it's not really a good movie either, because there's some things that just don't quite resonate with me. Some of the tonal differences are a little odd. Edward Norton's alright as the Hulk. I think he's this is a good Bruce Banner, but his Hulk is not as good as it becomes. Maybe because he's just in one movie. Not a lot of the characters, especially Liv Tyler's character, is not very good. I do like seeing Thunderbolt Ross. I think he's a good villain / antagonist. He's not really a villain, but Abomination's a great villain. I'm actually excited to see what he does. Well, he's a good villain, but what they could do with him is kind of nice, especially because spoiler alert, he showed up in Shang-Chi. So, yeah, it's decent. Some of the Hulk fights, like the Hulk fight at the end is quite good. And overall, it's just alright. Iron Man 2... you know what? It's sort of just meh. I mean, the biggest problem with this movie is that it's just littered with plot holes. Or plot lines. Not really plot holes, but the problem is that there's a huge lack of urgency throughout this movie, like the entire thing, and it's kind of frustrating when you're just trying to sort of enjoy this movie, and there's not much action, especially in the back half of the movie. There's only like two big action sequences, the race fight and the final battle. But when the action does happen, it is great. And I would say this is, when it comes to plot and story, this is probably the worst film in the MCU. And that's why it lands in the meh tier. Thor. I'm going to put this in good. I'm leaning towards very enjoyable. I'm only leaving good right now. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a fun film. And I don't really have any huge problems with it, except it does, like Iron Man 2, it kind of lacks urgency. And when you're on Earth, it's just not as interesting. There's not as much humor in this movie as there is in some of the, especially when you're on Asgard. Some of the action sequences are not that good. Loki's not as good as he becomes, but some characters like Odin, Frigga, those are all great. Heimdall's a good character. There's a lot of great things in this movie, but as a whole, it's not as good as some of the other MCU movies, or even one other Thor movie, I guess. Captain America: The First Avenger. This is going right in. Debating. I might come back to this one. This is tricky. I'm gonna leave it in great for right now. Yeah, because I think this is a great movie. The origin story is some of the best I don't know how to put it, like 50 minutes of the MCU. And just seeing how this guy Steve Rogers wants to help people and join the army is just great. And then once it starts montaging through World War II, after he saves those people from that Hydra base, it just becomes a lot less interesting. It's not as fun as the first hour of the film, and as a whole, it's just all right. I mean, after that, after the origin story, which is fantastic, the rest of the movie is not as good, and that's why it lands in great tier and not amazing. But it's very close to these, very enjoyable. I would say. Avengers going right in the amazing tier. Whoops, no, not quite that good. The Avengers is just an amazing film. I just think there's so many great things. The pacing is the one thing that kind of hurts it a little bit. But you also have the characters, the character bantering. That's all great. There's not much I would say I dislike about this movie. Loki's a great villain, and the final action sequence is some of the best action in the MCU. Probably the best. I don't really know. There's just every hero gets their great moment, and it really works. Yeah, as I said, my only problem was the pacing. The pacing should have been a lot better. It's very weird. But once you get to the end, you don't even care. Iron Man 3. Keeping up just one movie per tier, I guess. I'm just going to leave it very enjoyable. This is a very enjoyable movie. Like, it's a very entertaining movie. And before Eternals, I would have said this is probably the most different MCU movie. Like, it doesn't feel like it feels like an MCU movie, but it doesn't feel that similar to a lot of the other ones. And that's kind of why it lands where it is, I guess. But I think the biggest problem is the Mandarin twist. Like, it just kind of hurts the movie from being probably in the amazing tier, or the great tier, and just lands in just very enjoyable, close to good. And the problem is, it just hurts the movie, and it ruins this character. I mean, the All Hail the King one shot in Shang-Chi do kind of improve it, but not enough to make this movie better. And Killian is not what I would say a worthy replacement, I guess. He's not a replacement at all. So, yeah. So, overall, this is a very enjoyable movie, but definitely not one of my favorites. Thor the Dark World, whoops, my mistake. Thor the Dark World is definitely going in the bad tier. I am not a fan of this movie. It's very boring, not very rewatchable. I don't think I've watched this movie in at least over a year. Like, I've watched this movie I don't know how many times, but I don't remember. There are some good things. Like, it's a well-made movie. I think it's actually a better made movie than a few of the other ones around this point on the list. But it's definitely not what I would say a good movie. Some of the action sequences are fine. Like, I like the beginning of it, where Thor's just exploring realms of Asgard. That's pretty cool. But it's not great or anything. Some of the characters make interesting decisions. My favorite thing about this is the banter between Thor and Loki. I think that's great, but not too much. Not enough stands out to make me want to put this movie any higher. Winter Soldier, you know where this is going, right in the best tier. This is probably my favorite movie in the MCU, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So many great action sequences. The characters are all great. Alexander Pierce is a great villain. Bucky, seeing him again, that's a great little arc for Steve. Love all of that. My only issue this movie's out. Some of the other ones in the amazing tier, or really pretty much every other movie in the amazing or best of the best tier, has some sort of big emotional element. This does not. I guess another one in the best tier doesn't either, but still, it doesn't hurt the movie at all. It's just a very, 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 very minor nitpick. Guardians of the Galaxy, this is the other one I was talking about that doesn't have much emotion, but I guess if you want to say Groot's death. Sure. So Guardians of the Galaxy has always been one of my favorite MCU movies. It's fun. The characters are great. It's just a funny film. It's just a very enjoyable time. The only reason this is probably not my favorite MCU movie, the pacing's a little odd, and the Ronin's not a very good villain. But you don't really care, because you're here for the team, not for the battle with the villain. So, and that's why this movie's so good. Age of Ultron is going to go in the good tier. My issue with this one, I think Ultron is a great villain, don't get me wrong. But my issue with it, I can't say I love the beginning of the movie. I like the action sequence, but then it feels like they cut out, I think they actually did, cut out like 20 or 30 minutes of the movie to explain how Ultron's created. They shouldn't have cut that out. That was not a good decision on their behalf. So, and it hurts the movie quite a bit. There's some confusing things to it. Things happen before they're 100% explained. It's kind of a confusing movie, but as a whole, it doesn't really bother me too much because I think Ultron's a great film. The second half, I think, really works for me. First half, not as much. And I think the final action sequence is almost as good as the one in the original Avengers. A bit more emotion to it, but it doesn't matter. My biggest issue is that the relationship between Hulk and Black Widow, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, it's stupid. I'm glad they did not follow that up in Infinity War and Endgame. Ant-Man. I'm gonna put this in the great tier. I think this is a great movie. I mentioned, if you watch my channel for a year, you'll know that I really like this movie. I think it's a ton of fun. Like, it has ant-sized stakes. It's a heist movie. It's just a really enjoyable time. My only problem is that the villain is too similar to Obadiah Stane. And they didn't explore the whole particle messing with his mind thing enough. It's like the similar story to Doc Ock and Spider-Man 2. And I didn't mention it much in my review because I didn't have to, but you can go check that out. And they kind of did that, but they didn't. And that's a little frustrating. But as a whole, this is actually a great movie. Captain America Civil War are going to go right in the amazing tier. This is another amazing movie. Very rewatchable. Not just the airport fight is fantastic. A lot of the other ones are fantastic too, like the the fight in Bucharest. The final battle fight is fantastic. I have a little bit of issues with that, but I'll get into that like my final battle ranking whenever that comes. And as a whole, Civil War, just so many great things. The way the team kind of argues with each other is just great. It all really works. And they explain each of the team's worldviews, sort of, or what they believe, and that's really interesting. Like, and the movie is the perfect length. I wouldn't say it has to be any shorter or any longer. And I think the whole exploration on the Winter Soldiers, they could have done a little bit more, but it's still interesting. And as a whole, this is a nice conclusion to the Captain America trilogy. Doctor Strange, I'm just going to put this right in the good tier. It's a good movie and all, but it's never been one that I've always really liked that much. My biggest issue, it just feels like it's squishing Marvel formula with visuals from Dark City, Inception, Kaleidoscope, Escher drawings. It's just a weird mix. I think the first half of the movie is not very good. I don't really enjoy the first half. Once we get to Doctor Strange's actual training, it starts to become a much more interesting movie. Like, once we start to because the visuals become great, some of the action sequences are absolutely fantastic. The whole second half of the movie is great. First half, if it was just the first half, I would give it probably the meh tier. I don't care for the first half. Dormammu is a fine villain. I don't really care too much about the villains in this movie, like Thor: The Dark World and some of the other ones. This one's not really about the villain, kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just the first half kind of ruined it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, this is going to be it's an okay movie. It's fine. There's nothing I hate in this movie, really. There's nothing I like that much in here either. So it just kind of sits there and you're like, okay, it's fine. Ego's a fine enough villain. Interesting introduction to the Celestials in the MCU. I guess the real introduction was in Guardians of the Galaxy, where you see Eson the Searcher destroy that entire planet. So whatever. As a whole, this movie's it's all right. Like, there's just not much to say here. It's kind of dull for the whole first half. Once we get past I'd say once we get to Taserface's ship and then that whole battle breaks out, it starts to get a little better. The first half is actually quite good, but then once you get to the final battle with Ego and all of that, the movie just starts to become way worse because then the final battle is one of my least favorite in the MCU, and I'm not a fan of that. Homecoming, going right in the great tier. I think this is a great Spider-Man movie. Not my favorite or anything. I think it's actually my third or fourth favorite. But it's a really nice little change of pace, especially after Amazing Spider-Man 2, which wasn't a good movie at all. This is a much better movie than that. And I think it's really enjoyable. My only issue with this movie, the action sequences aren't that good. Like, I enjoyed the one that I enjoyed the one with the trucks. That was not chase. That one was actually pretty fun. And the one in the Washington, what's it called? I can't think of its name. Where they in Washington D.C. I should know this. I really should. Wherever they are, I can't think of what it's called. I'm being serious. I'm sorry, guys. So, as a whole, I think it doesn't really, that action sequence is quite good. Vulture is a fantastic villain, one of my favorite in the MCU. One of my favorite Spider-Man villain as well. Probably my second favorite, just behind Doc Ock. And as a whole, this is a really fun movie, but it's never been, like, my very favorite. Thor Ragnarok, another one going right in the great tier. I think this is an absolutely fantastic film. I don't think it's quite at the amazing tier, just because I do think some of the humor does get in the way from some of the action. And as a whole, it kind of ruins that. But the humor is just, I would say, is great. Like it's a very funny, laugh out loud movie. All the actors have a fantastic comedic timing, especially Chris Hemsworth and Jeff Goldblum, Tom Hiddleston also. And as a whole, there's just so many great things here. Hela's a pretty good villain, and I just really enjoy this movie. Again, it's just the humor is kind of what hurts it. Black Panther, yeah, it's amazing. I'm just changing something up and ignore my debate. No, I'm just kidding. It's gonna go into very enjoyable. Actually, you know what? How about that? It's a good enough movie. My biggest issue, just the CGI is kind of what ruins it. It's not the most rewatchable MCU movie either. Like, I never am like, I'm gonna go watch Black Panther. But the thing that really pushes this one up for me is Killmonger. I think he's a fantastic villain, but he's not enough to make me put this movie in the great. And I don't think it's the most enjoyable MCU movie either. Some action sequences are great, like I love those little gladiator fights in the pond. That's really cool. There's some pretty emotional moments too. Chadwick Boseman is still fantastic in all the movies he's been in the MCU. And I do think this is a great movie. I think Michael B. Jordan's absolutely fantastic. Again, it's just like the CGI is not very good, and some of the power set for the suit is interesting, but it's not good at all. But just Infinity War, you know where this is going. Right in the best tier. This is a very fantastic film. Probably my favorite of 2018. This or Fallout. And as a whole, it's just a great movie. I don't really have like any issues with it. And the main thing with this movie is that unlike some other movies that are this long, it feels like an hour and a half. Because that first half zooms by. Like, it's it's probably the fastest paced movie like I've ever seen. That's a bit of an overstatement, but it's a really fast paced film. And doesn't feel too fast paced or too slowly paced. And that's what's nice about it. Like, it's kind of the perfect pace for this movie. And Thanos is really what makes this movie fantastic. For the amount of development you have on him, you expect this movie to be a really slow-paced movie, but it's a very fast-paced, very enjoyable. Thanos is a fantastic villain, one of the best of all time, and that's why this movie goes in the best of the best tier. Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's okay. So this one has always been around my list. Like, some watches I think it's great, other watches it's just good. And then some of my watches, like my last one, it was just okay. My thing with this movie, the villains are kind of what hurts it. Sonny Birch is not a very good villain. Ghost, I feel like could have been a good villain, but she's just not, because it feels like with just a conversation they could have resolved everything. It's still an interesting movie. Like, it's still a fun film, especially after Infinity War. And I love the ending with Ant-Man going into the quantum realm. That post-credit scene's amazing. The Stan Lee cameo is fun. And as a whole, it's a nice movie coming off of Infinity War, which is probably the biggest movie in the MCU yet. Here, it's a much smaller story. Probably the most accessible MCU movie, or one of the most accessible, I guess. It's one of the more family-friendly MCU movies. It's a really fun film. It's just not one of my favorites. I'll just leave it at that. Captain Marvel going in the meh tier. I've never been a fan of this movie, except for my theater watch. I thought it was fantastic. After each watching, I think I like it less and less. And the problem with this movie is just the character of Captain Marvel is not that compelling, and it's just like their character arc is not very good. the action sequences are not that good. The effects are great. I will say that. Unlike some of the other MCU movies around this part, like Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2 and sort of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And as a whole, I think the characters kind of what ruins it for me. My favorite part about this movie is definitely D.H. Samuel Jackson. I think he's seeing a less cynical Nick Fury is really cool. And there's just some great things, but there's a lot of not so great things too. Avengers Endgame, I'm going to put this, it's close to the best tier, but it's just going to go in the amazing tier for right now. Because the problem is, the Thor Basky plotline and the Professor Hulk are kind of what ruins it. I'm not a fan of Professor Hulk at all. Thor Basky I'm okay with. It's funny and all, but like really call that depression, I guess. So, it's an interesting film because like I think the final hour is amazing. But for basically the entire movie, with the exception of a couple fights and all, but like there's like not much action. There's like pretty much no action. But I love how much character development there is in this movie. It makes a lot of characters better. Like Rhodey, Tony, Steve. Like characters are made even better in this movie, and that's really interesting. And the final hour of this movie, as I said, it's absolutely amazing. Some of the best fan service in the entire film, or the MCU. And I really like that. It's just the Thor Basky plotline and the Professor Hulk are kind of what ruins it, just slightly. Spiderman Far From Home, I put in very enjoyable. My only reason why it's not even great tier is just because I'm not a fan of the Edith plotline. It's just terrible. I feel like a lot of these Spider-Man movies, No Way Home, I think is going to be the same too, where like it's going to be the setup for the whole some big bad things happening. It's just not going to be good. But the post-credit scene was absolutely amazing. Mysterio is actually a good villain. Like Jake Gyllenhaal does an amazing job. And my only issue is really just the Edith plotline. It's very fun, funny. Tom Holland and his friends, I would say, are even better in this movie than they were in Homecoming. And I really like that. So, overall, really fun film. And as a whole, some of the Mysterio action sequences are quite good. As a whole, I would say the action's actually much better in this film than it was in Homecoming, and even some other Spider-Man movies, too. I don't really have many issues with this movie. It's just the Edith plotline is a huge one. WandaVision, I'm gonna give it the only reason why it's not in the great tier is because I just did not like the ending. The 7th and the 9th episodes were not very good. Especially the 7th episode. It's a very weird follow-up to the 6th episode where she expanded the hex, and it's just weird. So, the first 3 episodes were kind of interesting, but not very good. Then, once we get to the 4th, 5th, and 6th episode, then it starts to become fantastic, and makes the first 3 episodes much better. This is, of the 3 shows, this is probably the best one to rewatch, and I would say it's definitely one of the second weakest. And as a whole, it's a nice TV show as the first MC TV show. Interesting way to do it. I think I kind of like this more over time because of some of the other very ambitious things the MCU did, like Loki, Shang-Chi, What If, or not so much What If, Eternals. Like once you see those, it kind of makes this better because this is probably the most different MCU thing that we've gotten at all. That or Eternals, but really, I think that WandaVision is great. My parents didn't enjoy it, but I did. Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's okay. The reason why I don't even think it's in the good tier, I was just super disappointed. I was expecting this to be amazing. Like, I was expecting this to be fantastic. Or at least in the great tier. And I was super disappointed. With the final product that we got, it was just like, I think the first couple episodes were great. But then once we got to the rest of the show, it was just very tired in general. And I think there's a couple great episodes, but none of them really stick out as best of the MCU TV shows. But as a whole, I mean, it's fine. Like, I don't have much wrong with this show. But it's just definitely not one of my favorites. Black Widow, I'm just gonna give it the good. I mean, the biggest problem here, some of the characters are great, like Yelena, Russian Captain America, or why can't I think of his name? What's wrong with me? Uh, Red Guardian. There you go. Red Guardian, Melina, all the characters, the four characters of the family are great. The Taskmaster is probably one of the most disappointing things in the entire MCU. Like, they could have done so much more, but they didn't, so that's kind of disappointing. But as a whole, this movie, it's good and all, but it's not one where I'm like, this is absolutely fantastic. Like, it's not one I'm ever really in the mood to rewatch. I don't think I have rewatched it yet. I will rewatch it once I do my full MCU ranking, probably after Doctor Strange 2. So, for now, it's just in the good tier. Loki, this is going in the amazing tier. I think Loki, they explored so many great things here. It's one of the, I think, most interesting things the MCU has done. I think as a whole, I love the setup. This should have been maybe the first thing Phase 4 did. I think they got out, I'm glad they got out Falcon Winter Soldier, WandaVision, Black Widow. This first feels like the first actual thing that comes out in Phase 4. Like, this kind of kicked off Phase 4. Even though it really didn't, but whatever. I think this is probably the one I was expecting of the first three shows. This is the one I was expecting to like the least, but I ended up liking it the most. Of even the four, if you include What If. So, as a whole, Loki just delivered so many great things. Really fun. I'm excited for Season 2, and it was just fantastic. Shang-Chi, another one, gonna go in the great tier. My only issue, I really wish this was a bit more practical and less CGI. But that's I don't hate that or anything. But and I think Shang-Chi is a great character. I think some people don't like the character. I really did. Wen-Wu was a fantastic villain, or the Mandarin, I guess. Aquafina's pretty fun. My biggest problem is that some of the humor really got in the way. I feel like one thing Eternals did right that Shang-Chi didn't is that Shang-Chi missed some of the humor was placed in weird spots, and then I don't think Eternals all the humor is placed perfectly. So, this is another example with the MCU getting a bit ahead of themselves with some of the humor. But other than that, I think this is a great movie. CGI is absolutely fantastic. Some of the spectacle near the end, I think I appreciated that a lot more in rewatch. I did rewatch this movie. And as a whole, it's actually a really nice movie. What If, another one going to go in the great tier. I think this show, my only issue with it is that some of the episodes weren't as good, but that was kind of expected. This is kind of where I was expecting to place What If. Pretty much, this is one of those shows where it didn't really exceed my expectations. It didn't really under-exceed my expectations. I'd say it met them. So, as a whole, I did enjoy What If. It was a fun show. It's just not one of my favorites. And I think I think the Guardians of the Multiverse thing was a little tacked on, and then not tacked on, but sort of like they didn't really explore it enough to where I think it's very compelling. So, yeah, that's where What If stands. But it's a really fun show. Eternals, this is definitely the hardest one of any of them. No. For now, I'm just going to be in the middle. I'm just going to put it in the good. So, I would say it's going to spoilers. This is one. I think it's going to take me a rewatch to really resonate with this movie because there were so many great things. All the world building with the Celestials and all of that's fantastic. But the story and the characters and the character inconsistencies are what ruined this movie. The story feels so rushed. There's so many elements to it where they skipped the main. They only really delivered the main character arc of the movie in one scene. So, and I think Ajax totally should have been the main character, not Cersei, because it really just feels like them taking a message from past element and just deciding what to do. And even in the end, with Cersei saying, "Did we really? Should we really have done this?" It kind of hurt the movie, and it makes the movie kind of frustrating. So that's why it's in the good and not in the great tier. This is definitely one of the more frustrating MCU movies. Okay, now it's ranking time. Thor the Dark One last. I'll keep that. I like Iron Man 2 more than Captain Marvel. Okay, tier, I'm put Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 there. At number, 30, 29, 28, 27. 26, I'm going to go with Incredible Hulk. 25, 24. 23, I'm going to go with... this is tricky. I think I'll keep Eternals there. 22, I'm going to go with Doctor Strange. 21, I'm going to go with the original Thor. 20, Black Widow. 19, Black Panther. 18, Avengers Age of Ultron. 17, I'm going to go with Iron Man 3. Actually, 17 is Spiderman Far From Home. 16 is Iron Man 3. 15 is WandaVision. 14, I would say, is probably Captain America: The First Avenger. 13 is What If. 12 is Ant-Man. 11, 11 is probably Shang-Chi. Actually, no. 11 is Homecoming. 10 is Shang-Chi. 9 is Thor Ragnarok. These three are kind of tied. 8, I'm going to go with Loki. 7, I'm going to go with Civil War. 6 is The Avengers. 5 is... These two are tied. I'm going to go with Iron Man over Endgame. 5 is Endgame. 4 is Iron Man. And then 3, 2, 1. This is probably my ranking for right now. We'll see where No Way Home places. I have been rewatching some MCU movies then and now, so you can see where they place soon in my No Way Home. Spider-Man reviews will be coming up soon, and yeah, that's about no more announcements, I guess. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.